Frank's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Through the bank's front windows, the massive billboard was clearly visible. David Chen's face, 20 feet tall, with the text First National Bank, proud partner of Chen Development Corporation. Rita's professional composure cracked. Mr. Chen, I am so sorry. If I had known. If you had known what? David's voice was sharp as a blade. If you had known my wife was married to someone important, you would have treated her with respect. What about treating her with respect because she's a human being? Because she walked into your bank with a legitimate transaction. He turned to Frank, who seemed to be trying to disappear into his chair. You destroyed my wife's check. You accused her of fraud. You humiliated her in front of all these people. Based on what? What evidence did you have? Frank stammered. I thought. It seemed what? David pressed. Too much money for someone who looks like her to have. Is that what you thought? The silence that followed was devastating. Every person in that bank knew exactly what had happened, even if Frank would never admit it. Rita spoke quickly, desperately. Mr. Chen, please, let me handle this. Frank, my office, right now. Security, please pull the footage from the last 30 minutes. All of it. I want to see that footage too, David said. And I want to know if this is the first time something like this has happened, or if there's a pattern. Rita nodded, her face tight. Of course. Please, both of you, come to my office. I will personally ensure this is resolved. As they walked toward the back offices, Maya heard Frank's voice, small and desperate. Mr. Chen, please, I didn't know. I made a mistake. I have a family. David stopped, turning back. His expression was not angry anymore, just tired. My wife has a family too. Our 2 children will hear about what happened to their mother today. They'll learn that no matter how hard you work, no matter what you achieve, some people will only see your skin color. You didn't make a mistake, Frank. You made a choice. In Rita's office, the security footage told the complete story. Frank's expression when Maya first approached. The way he handled her check with contempt. The deliberate, calculated way he tore it apart. There was no ambiguity, no room for interpretation, but there was more. Rita, to her credit, pulled Frank's employment file. 3 previous complaints, all from customers of color. Each one noted, each one dismissed as a misunderstanding. Each one buried to avoid dealing with the problem. This ends now, Rita said, her voice hollow. Frank Morrison's employment with First National Bank is terminated, effective immediately. Mrs. Chen, your check will be replaced by the issuing law firm, and our bank will cover any fees or delays associated with that process. Additionally, I am recommending to our regional director that we implement mandatory bias training for all staff, and establish a clear protocol for handling discrimination complaints. David nodded slowly. That's a start. But here's what else is going to happen. First National Bank will issue a public statement about what occurred here today. Not naming names, but acknowledging the failure and committing to change. Second, you will establish an independent oversight committee to review complaints. Third, I will be moving some, but not all, of my company's accounts to other institutions, and whether I move the rest will depend on whether I see real change here. Rita agreed to everything. There was nothing else she could do. As Maya and David left the bank an hour later, the sun was setting, casting the billboard in orange light. Maya looked up at her husband's face, 30 feet tall, smiling down at the street. You know what the sad part is? She said quietly. If I had walked in there and mentioned your name first, none of this would have happened. I would have been treated like royalty. David squeezed her hand. I know. But change doesn't come from people being afraid of who you're married to. It comes from people being held accountable for their actions. 3 months later, Frank Morrison's termination became part of a larger story. A local news investigation revealed that First National Bank had systematically dismissed discrimination complaints for years. The story went regional, then national. The bank faced lawsuits, protests, and a complete restructuring of its management, but more importantly, other banks began examining their own practices. Training programs improved. Oversight committees were established. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't fast, but it was movement in the right direction. Maya's settlement check was reissued within a week. She and David used part of it to establish a legal defense fund for people facing discrimination who couldn't afford attorneys. They called it the Second Chance Fund. Sometimes, late at night, Maya thought about that moment when Frank tore up her check. The rage, the humiliation, the feeling of powerlessness. But she also thought about what came after. The way David stood beside her. The way Rita, despite her initial hesitation, ultimately did the right thing. The way one act of cruelty became a catalyst for change. Justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation. It was about taking the worst moments and forcing them to create something better. And every time Maya drove past that billboard, she smiled. Not because David's face was on it, but because she knew that behind that image was a story of resistance, of standing firm, of refusing to accept injustice even when it would have been easier to walk away. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the apologies, but the knowledge that they had fought back, and won. The glass doors of First National Bank swung open, and Maya Chen stepped inside, clutching her purse close to her chest. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floor. She had been traveling for 6 hours straight, and exhaustion showed in every step she took. Her settlement check, the result of 3 years fighting a discrimination lawsuit against her former employer, sat folded in her wallet. $25,000. Money that would change everything for her family. She approached the counter, where 3 tellers sat behind thick glass partitions. The first 2 had long lines. The third, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a nameplate that read Frank Morrison, sat idle, sorting papers. Maya walked up to his window. "Good afternoon," she said, sliding her identification and the check through the slot. "I need to deposit this, please." Frank glanced up, his eyes narrowing as they moved from Maya's face to the check. He picked it up, holding it between 2 fingers as if it might contaminate him. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice flat and cold. Maya blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me. This check? Where did it come from?" Frank turned it over, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This is a lot of money." "It's from a legal settlement," Maya explained, keeping her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "My lawyer sent it to me. Everything is legitimate." Frank scoffed, shaking his head slowly. He looked at her identification again, then back at the check. Other customers in line were starting to notice the exchange. An elderly woman 2 counters down craned her neck to see what was happening. "I don't think so," Frank said, his voice rising slightly. "This looks fraudulent to me. We get people trying to pull scams like this all the time." Maya's heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Sir, I assure you, that check is real. You can call the law firm if you need verification. The number is right there on the check." "I don't need to call anyone," Frank snapped. Then, before Maya could react, he picked up the check with both hands and tore it cleanly down the middle. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the quiet bank. He tore it again, and again, until the pieces fluttered onto his desk like confetti. The lobby fell silent. Every eye turned toward window 3. Maya stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. That check represented her family's future, her children's college fund, The ability to finally breathe after years of struggle. You need to leave, Frank said, pushing the torn pieces back through the slot. Before I call security and have you arrested for attempted fraud. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the shredded paper. Rage and disbelief fought for dominance in her chest. But she had been here before, in different forms, throughout her life. She knew how this worked. She knew that losing control now would only make things worse. I want to speak to your manager, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Right now. Frank leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. The manager is busy. And she's going to tell you the same thing I did. Now leave, or I'm calling security. Then call security, Maya said, not moving an inch. Because I'm not going anywhere until I speak to a manager. Frank's face reddened. He picked up his phone, jabbing at the buttons with more force than necessary. Yeah, this is Frank at Station 3. I need security at my window. Now. We have a situation. Within seconds, a uniformed guard appeared from a side office. He was young, maybe 25, and looked uncomfortable as he approached. Ma'am, is there a problem here? Yes, there is, Maya said, turning to face him. This teller just destroyed my legitimate check and accused me of fraud. I want to speak to the manager. The security guard looked at Frank, then back at Maya. Uncertainty flickered across his face. Sir, what happened? She tried to deposit a fake check, Frank said quickly, loudly enough for everyone in the bank to hear. $25,000. Obviously fraudulent. I disposed of it appropriately. It was not fake. Maya's voice finally rose, and she hated herself for it, hated that she had to defend herself against lies. That was a settlement check from a law firm, and he had no right to destroy it. The commotion had finally drawn the attention of someone in authority. A woman in a sharp navy suit emerged from an office at the back of the bank. Her nameplate identified her as Rita Alvarez, branch manager. She moved quickly, her heels clicking against the floor. What is going on out here? Rita demanded, looking from Frank to Maya to the security guard. This woman tried to deposit a fraudulent check, Frank said before anyone else could speak. I recognized it immediately. She became hostile when I refused the transaction. That is a lie. Maya's voice shook with anger now. He tore up my check without even attempting to verify it. He accused me of fraud based on nothing. Rita's eyes moved to the torn pieces of paper on Frank's counter. She picked up one of the larger pieces, examining it. Her expression remained neutral, but something shifted in her posture. Frank, did you attempt to verify this check before destroying it? Rita asked carefully. I didn't need to verify it, Frank said, though his confidence seemed to waver slightly. It was obviously fake. You can tell just by looking at it. Maya pulled her phone from her purse, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. I'm calling my husband. He'll straighten this out. Your husband? Frank laughed bitterly. What's he going to do? Maya didn't answer. She pressed the phone to her ear, and after 2 rings, a deep voice answered. Hey honey, how did the deposit go? David, I need you to come to First National Bank right now, Maya said, her voice barely controlled. Something has happened. Please hurry. I'm 5 minutes away, David said, his tone immediately shifting to concern. Don't move. I'm coming. The bank lobby remained tense as they waited. Rita stood with her arms crossed, clearly trying to assess the situation. Frank had gone quiet, but his expression remained defiant. Other customers whispered among themselves, some glancing at Maya with sympathy, others with suspicion. When the doors opened again, David Chen walked in, and the energy in the room shifted dramatically. He was tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit that spoke of success. But more than that, he was familiar. Rita's eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Chen, she said, Her voice suddenly uncertain. I didn't realize you were that woman's husband. David finished, walking straight to Maya and putting his arm around her shoulders. Yes. Maya is my wife. Now, would someone like to explain to me why she just called me in tears? Frank's face had gone pale. He stared at David as if seeing a ghost. Your husband is David Chen? Rita asked Maya, though the answer was obvious. The David Chen? Yes, Maya said quietly. Owner of Chen Development Corporation. Your bank's largest commercial client. The man whose face is on that billboard right outside your building.